What's going on, everybody? We are continuing our countdown of the greatest Seinfeld episodes, ranking every episode. I am on part 8. We're going to recap numbers 55 through 40. And in this episode, we talk about toupees, bras, calzones, face painters, so much more. We're getting into just for the record, a bad Seinfeld episode is better than most any other TV shows. So there are no we're ranking them, but we're getting into the really good ones now. We're going to be in the top 50. So let's get into it. Number 54, the Chinese woman from season 6. Jerry gets a date with a woman, Donna Chang, who switches up phone lines, and he thinks she's Chinese, but realizes that's not the case. Elaine and Jerry see George's father talking to a strange man in a cape. And what else happened? Elaine's friend Noreen won't stop chatting, so she causes them to be broken up, and Kramer gets involved, and it's a whole thing. But the big thing about this episode was Donna Chang. The whole thing with them thinking she was Chinese. She quotes Confucius. She gets her L's and R's mixed up. At one point, Jerry says, "You're not Chinese." And somehow the lines were crossed with George, and she ends up talking to George's mom, who George's mom and dad were talking about getting a divorce. But because she talked to the nice Chinese woman, and that got advice for that, she decided to not get a divorce. But then when she found out that she was not Chinese, George's mom says, "I'm not taking advice from some girl from Long Island." This is a very good episode. Anytime George's parents are fighting, it's funny. The man in the cape was Frank's lawyer, and Frank says he's very independent. He doesn't follow the trends. And Estelle says, "Well, that looks ridiculous." And he says, "You have no eye for fashion." And she's like, "I have no eye for fashion." Classic George's parents fighting. Again, this is so much like my parents. Oh my goodness. It pains me to watch this episodes with the parents. Number 53, the caddy from season 7. Elaine's floozy former ex-roommate Sue Ellen Mischke is here, and Elaine buys her a bra, but because apparently she's never worn one before. So there's that whole thing with Sue Ellen Mischke and causing an accident because she only wears a bra, and Kramer gets Jackie Childs to sue her, but then Jerry falls in love with her, and it's the whole spoof on the OJ trial. So there's that one story. But then there's the George story, where George locks his keys in his car and leaves the car in the Yankees parking lot, and his boss sees him come in the morning and sees he's the first one there in the morning, and then Steinbrenner leaves at night and sees that George is the last one there, and they think that he's such a hard worker. Well, we know that's not the case, but something happens where they go up to the cabin that Kramer burned down. They rebuilt it, and so George is in the cabin, and Jerry and Kramer take the car to get washed because it was full of bird poop and flyers. But then they get into the wreck because they see Sue Ellen Mischke in a bra. So they bring the car back, and it's all damaged, and they see blood, and George's boss and Steinbrenner think that George died. So Steinbrenner goes to George's parents to tell him that George died, and it is one of the greatest scenes in the whole series. First of all, let's get to Jackie Childs, because anything involving Jackie Childs is hilarious. But they tell Jackie Childs that Sue Ellen Mischke is the heir to the Henry candy fortune. He says, "Oh, Henry, that's one of our top sellers candy bars. It's got chocolate, peanuts, nougats. It's delicious, scrumptious, outstanding. Everything Jackie says is in threes. It's awesome. But then then Steinbrenner shows up to the Costanza's house, and Frank leaves a message on Jerry's machine. It says, Jerry's Frank Costanza, Mr. Steinbrenner is here. George is dead. Call me back. Awesome. So Jerry's telling George what's going on, and George, he says, Jerry says, aren't you going to tell your parents you're still alive? And he's like, oh, they could use the break. But one of the greatest scenes is when Steinbrenner goes to the Costanzas. Steinbrenner says, well, he's been logging pretty heavy hours. First one in, last one out. That kid was a human dynamo. And George's mom says, are you sure that's what we're talking about, George? And then as George Steinbrenner is telling his parents that their son died, Frank Costanza is yelling at him about a Jay Buhner trade. That is so awesome. It's like, what the hell did you trade Jay Buhner for? He had 30 home runs, over 100 RBIs last year. You got a rocket for an arm. You don't know what you're doing. And Steinbrenner says, well, Buhner was a good prospect, no question about it. But my baseball people said Ken Phelps, Matt. They kept saying Ken Phelps. Oh my goodness. If your son just died, maybe don't yell at the guy about a baseball trade. If you're younger and don't know what the hate is about George Steinbrenner back then, it was George Steinbrenner. He was one of those owners that just he kept messing up because he would trade like young prospects for veterans. It was all about now, and in the 80s it did not work. Obviously in the 90s, and they started winning, but yeah, it was George Steinbrenner was a very hated owner because he was very involved in the franchise too much. Number 52, the Rye from season 7. George is nervous about a upcoming dinner he and parents are having with Susan and her parents. They don't hit it off. And then there's the Rye. Elaine has a musician boyfriend, but Jerry may ruin the relationship when he describes it as hot and heavy. And Kramer gets the use of a neighbor's handsome cab and begins giving guided tours of New York. So this is the episode where George's parents meet Susan's parents, and it's just such a clash. They're both absurd in their own ways. So, but George's dad says, let me understand. You got the hen, the chicken, and the rooster. The rooster goes with the chicken. So who's having sex with the hen? And Susan's dad said, they're all chickens. The rooster has sex with all of them. And George's dad says, that's perverse. Also, he brings up the idea of spoilers, which I mean we still deal with to this day and have dealt with for years, where they're discussing a movie and they're talking about a scene, and Frank says, I haven't seen it. Don't talk about it. It's like, it has nothing to do with the plot. He's like, I like to go in fresh. But this is also so George's parents bring a rye bread. They don't put it out. So Frank takes it back, and George tries to bring it back, but there was none left at Schnitzel's bakery or whatever. So Jerry, the old lady in front of Jerry, takes the last rye bread, and Jerry steals it from her. He says, shut up, you old bag. And of course that comes back to haunt him later when with the Cadillac episode, because she's the deciding vote in whether Morty gets impeached from the Boca Vista. Also Kramer got a whole bunch of stuff from like a Sam's Club Costco type thing, and he got too much stuff, and he loves his beefarino, and he was feeding it to Rusty the horse. And George had Kramer take Susan's parents on a romantic horse ride, and it didn't go well because the horse was farting all the time because he was eating the beefarino. And the Kramer would say, Rusty, and the farts were too bad. I just wonder, did did Susan's parents know that the guy driving the thing, Kramer, was the one that burned down their cabin? Probably not, but that would have been great. Also the whole thing with Elaine's boyfriend, and he didn't do a certain thing, and then he did, and it ruined him from playing saxophone or something like that. I don't know. That's a little too risque. Number 51, the calzone. Steinbrenner takes a liking to George's calzone, and the two of them start having lunch every day. But then George angers the calzone people because he looks like he's taking a tip. So he has to use Newman to deliver the calzones. And also Kramer likes his clothes warm, so he puts them in an oven. I don't know. And then there's a thing with Elaine's guy Todd Gack keeps making stupid bets so that he'll go out with her, and he keeps saying that these aren't dates, but then eventually he has them meet her parents, and I don't know, that was really stupid. But also Jerry's girlfriend is really pretty, so she gets whatever she wants. Hey, real talk, we know how this is the world works. If you're pretty, you get whatever you want. So this is just playing up on that. They say she's like a beautiful Godzilla. But I anytime there's Steinbrenner in an episode, it's good. At one point it says Big Stein wants an eggplant calzone. But because George annoys the calzone people, he gets Newman to do it because it's on his route or whatever. And but Newman doesn't work. He calls off one day because it rained, and George is like, you don't work in the rain? You're a mailman. Neither rain nor sleet nor snow. It's the first one. But of course, Newman is Newman. And then Kramer tries to do it, but then Kramer fights with the calzone guy, who's like a typical Italian pizza owner. And it's Kramer pretending to be Italian or something like that. It was pretty amusing. Number 50, the face painter from season 6. Jerry gets tickets to a New Jersey Devils playoff game. He invites Kramer, Putty, and Elaine, but then they're weirded out because Putty shows up in face paint. They try to get tickets again, but Jerry never says thank you, so they don't get the tickets. And then there's the whole thing with George telling his girlfriend that he loves her, but she can't hear him because she's hard of hearing in one ear. And Kramer battles a chimpanzee at the zoo. That was really dumb. George falls in love with a girl named Sienna, and Jerry says, yeah, he's dating a crayon. Also, Gary Fogel, the guy played by John Lovitz, the guy that pretended to have cancer, he died in a car accident from adjusting his toupee. Okay, whatever. But the whole thing, the main thing is the face painting. But he's saying, gotta support the team. And him going up after the game, going up to a car that had a priest in it, and Putty said, we're the Devils, and the priest thinking that is the devil. He's like, El Diablo. And that was funny. Anything. Putty is another one of those characters. Anytime he was in it, it was funny. Elaine told him, I don't like you wearing face paint. He's like, oh yeah, I'll change for you. I won't do it anymore. And then he says, I gotta go home and get changed before the game. I'll be back. We'll make out. Just the way he says things is just so funny. Number 49, the red dot from season 3. As a thank you for getting him a job at her place of work, George gets Elaine a thank you gift. He gets her a cashmere sweater that's marked down from $600 to $85. But the only problem is there's a red dot on it that everyone can see, and it annoys Elaine. Meanwhile, George has a tryst with the cleaning lady, and Elaine's boyfriend falls off the wagon because he mixes drinks with Jerry's drink, and Kramer drinks scotch. I think that's all Kramer did in this episode. Um, Kramer, Jerry had an old bottle of Hennigan's, and they tried to see if you could smell them after you drank the Hennigan. So Kramer starts drinking the Hennigans, and then he starts doing like commercials for Hennigans. He's like, that's right, folks. I just had 3 shots of Hennigans and I don't smell. Imagine you could walk around all drunk all day. That's Hennigans. No smell, no tell. Scotch. Good stuff. And they talk about whether it's on the wagon or off the wagon, or I'm not even sure myself. But the main thing about this episode, one of the most iconic scenes, one of the best scenes in all the series, is when George gets caught with the cleaning lady, and the boss says, I'm going to get right to the point. It has come to my attention that you and the cleaning woman have engaged in sexual intercourse on the desk in your office. Is that correct? And George says, was that wrong? Should I not have done that? I tell you, I got to plead ignorance on this thing, because if anyone had said anything to me when I first started here, that sort of thing was frowned upon, because I work in a lot of offices, and I tell you, people do that all the time. One of the best scenes in the entire thing. There is a line. I don't even know why they said it. They say, hey, Jerry, when do you consider that sex has taken place? And Jerry says, I would say when the nipple makes its first appearance. They had to do, I think they had to do the feel good ending where Elaine's boyfriend is not is back on the wagon or whatever. He's not drinking anymore. I think they had to do that, because that's a real bad look. I mean, I know Seinfeld has done some awful things, but making a guy an alcoholic is not a good thing. So number 48, the beard from season 6. Elaine attempts to convert a homosexual man to heterosexuality. Kramer sets George up with a woman and not having a photograph, describes her to a police sketch artist. Jerry gets together with a female officer and takes a polygraph test on whether or not he has seen the show Melrose Place. This is the episode with George in a toupee. And he is full of confidence. He's feeling good, and Elaine hates that he's wearing this stupid toupee. And George is in the toupee. This is another one of those iconic scenes where eventually Elaine just gets so sick of it, rips it off his head, takes it to the window, and says, I don't like this thing, and here's what I'm doing with it. And she throws it out the window. Because what happens is Kramer tries to fix him up with this girl, and it turns out she's bald. And George says, she's bald. You fixed me up with a bald woman. And Elaine just freaks out and says, don't you see what's going on here? You're bald. And George says, I was bald. So there was that whole thing. There was when Elaine was trying to convert the guy, he said, she's trying to get him, and he says, why don't you switch teams? And he says, but I'm a starting shortstop. And Elaine says, we need a shortstop real bad, but it doesn't work, because his is another good quote. Elaine says, well, here's the thing. Being a woman, I only really have access to the equipment, 30-45 minutes a week, and that's on a good week. How can I be expected to have the same expertise as people who own the equipment and have access to it 24 hours a day their entire lives? You can't. And Jerry says, that's why they lose very few players. Very funny. Very funny. And then Kramer does work in police lineups, and that was kind of dumb. But the whole thing with Jerry and the lie detector thing, he agrees to the lie detector, and he knows he's going to get caught, but he tries to ask George for advice, because George is the all-time greatest liar. And George says, I can't do it. I can't impart my wisdom to you. She said, just remember one thing. Just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. But in the end, Jerry takes a lie detector and they're asking him all these questions about Melrose Place. And he freaks out. He says, "Oh yeah," and he just starts. He admits that he sees the show. And at the end, they're all watching Melrose Place, and Jerry says, "Oh, that Michael, I hate him. He's just so smug." Number 47, the trip from season 4. Jerry is set to appear on the Tonight Show in Los Angeles and asks George if he'd like to come along. And they take this opportunity to find Kramer. Kramer has been going on auditions, but also is wanted for being the smog strangler or whatever. I don't know why I had this episode even this high. This episode stunk. It's just it was out of place. It was very out of place for them to go to LA. It was just very weird. George at the backstage sees Corbin Burnson and George Wendt and talks to them, and then they go on when they go on the Tonight Show, they talk about their horrible experiences with George. George tells Corbin Burnson that he basically killed his girlfriend's cat, and he says that should be a case on LA law. And then he tells George Wendt, enough with the bar already. Maybe have Cheers be somewhere else or some stupid thing like that. I don't know. Yeah, this was bad. It also was off because there was no Elaine, because Julia Louis-Dreyfus was on maternity leave. At one point, Kramer approaches Fred Savage and basically says, "Hey, I'm not crazy." He was just trying to give him his script or whatever. Just not a good episode. I don't even know why it was this high. Also the thing with the beds, he's like, that's one tuck and one no tuck. Okay, whatever. In the end, they all come back to New York. Even Kramer comes back to New York and doesn't even mention it. So whatever. Number 46, the label maker from season 6. Jerry gets Super Bowl tickets, can't use them because of going to the Drake's wedding. He gives them to Tim Whatley and gets a label maker in return. And Whatley is accused of regifting. Also, George learns that his girlfriend has a male roommate and gets weirded out by the concept, but loves the male roommate's possessions, which include a velvet couch. And Kramer and Newman engage in a heated game of Risk. Oh boy, this was okay. I mean, the whole thing with the Super Bowl tickets, and the regifting and all the plots were so intertwined. That was very interesting. But this is, I think, once again where we hear George say, "I would wrap myself in velvet if it was socially acceptable." But at one point, Jerry says, "Oh, it's Risk, a game of world domination played by two guys that could barely run their own lives." And basically, they have to keep the game of Risk at Jerry's apartment because they're afraid that Newman and Kramer are they're suspicious that each other is going to cheat. Whatever. I like when Newman goes to Jerry's apartment and he tries to get in, and Newman says, "Jerry, I'm a little insulted," and Jerry says, "You're not a little anything, Newman." At one point about Elaine and Whatley, Jerry says, I think he regifted. He de-gifted. Now he's using an upstairs invite as a springboard to a Super Bowl sex romp. And the whole thing ends up with Jerry and Newman going to the Super Bowl. Okay, whatever. Unfortunately, this is another one of those timely episodes, because while they're playing Risk on the subway, Kramer is winning, and I think all Newman says, "Well, at least I still have Ukraine," and Kramer says, "Ukraine is weak." And then some guy, I'm guessing from Ukraine, comes and hears us, says, "Ukraine is not weak," and he breaks the board and smashes the game. Okay, whatever. Unfortunately timely. Number 45, the glasses from season 5. George loses his glasses at the health club. but his plan to get a new pair using Kramer's discount backfires. Jerry buys a black market air conditioner, and Elaine gets bit by a dog at the optometrist's office. What does Kramer do? Kramer doesn't do much in this episode. This is so yeah, they're getting glasses, and a dog bites Elaine, and Elaine starts acting like she has rabies. She goes to a doctor, and I guess it's an Indian doctor or something like that, and she says, "Do I get a shot?" And the doctor says, "No shot, dog bite, woof woof, not bang bang." Okay. Jerry's girlfriend is Anna Gunn, who was very big on Breaking Bad. Okay. I guess what Kramer does in this episode is he confronts the optometrist because he got him off sugar. And he has a scene. He says, "You were all hopped up on cinnamon swirls. They wouldn't even serve you anymore. You wouldn't even have any teeth if it wasn't for me dragging you to Joe's fruit stand and stuffing cantaloupe down your throat." Great scene. George accused Jerry's girlfriend of making out with cousin Jeffrey, who apparently looks like a horse, but George didn't have his glasses, so they wasn't sure what was going on. At one point, George thought he was eating an apple, but it was actually an onion. Okay. Kramer gets the air conditioner, just sets it on the windowsills, and he says, "It's installed." Like, really? And then the air conditioner ends up falling and lands on a dog. Okay. At the end, Jerry goes to cousin Jeffrey's apartment, but Uncle Leo is there. And Uncle Leo says, his botany teacher from college stays in close touch with him. They became friends. That's pretty rare. I mean, actual friends, like equals. They have dinner together. They have discussions. I love Uncle Leo. I gotta do a ranking of all the Seinfeld characters. Number 44, the old man from season 4. Elaine gets the gang to volunteer visiting the elderly, each adopting an old person, and it just does not go well. Elaine gets freaked out by her elderly person because she has a huge goiter, but she did have an affair with Gandhi. George's guy fires him, and Jerry loses his guy. Also, Kramer and Newman scheme to sell records to vintage music store, and they steal the records from Jerry's old guy. There's some good parts, but there's some I don't know. The old guy was a little. They were all a little cranky, but in the beginning, George says, "There's got to be more to life than this. What gives you pleasure?" And Jerry says, "Listening to you. I listened to this for 15 minutes and I'm on top of the world. Your misery is my pleasure." I'm not sure if we're introduced to Newman, but I think this is the first time we really see him. This is the first time we hear what his profession is, that he's a mailman. And George says, aren't those the guys that go crazy and shoot up the place? And they said, "Why is that?" And Newman says, "Because the mail never stops. It just keeps coming and coming and coming. There's never a let up. It's relentless. Every day it piles on more and more and more. And you got to get it out, but the more you get out, it keeps coming. And then the barcode reader breaks, and it's publisher's clearinghouse day." And Newman has one of his freakouts. Newman and Kramer trying to sell the records to the dude Bleecker Bob, who was the villain in Saw. That was pretty good. Basically, they give the records to him, and the guy won't give him any money for them. And they said, "But we have Sergio Mendes. Sergio Mendes has a cult following. They follow him like a cult. He can't even walk down the street in South America." The guy's like, "Well, that's not my problem." Also, George says, "Hey, I'm a great quitter. It's one of the few things I do well. I come from a long line of quitters. My father was a quitter. My grandfather was a quitter. I was raised to give up." So they're in Jerry's old guy's apartment. They're taking the records, and the old guy doesn't like it. He fights Kramer and Newman. Then in the fight, the dentures go flying. They end up in the garbage disposal, and they turn on the disposal and mess them up. They lose the old guy, and somehow George is with his shirt off, having the cleaning lady who does not speak English dip his head in oil. Okay, cool. Typical Seinfeld craziness. Number 43, the conversion from season 5. George decides to convert to Latvian Orthodox to impress a girl against his angry parents' objections. Kramer converts a nun at the church, and Jerry takes a peek at his girlfriend's medicine cabinet and is stunned by what he finds. Okay, I mean, this is another one of those great Seinfeld plots where George converts to Latvian Orthodox. What's funny is the writer for this episode didn't know that Latvian Orthodox was actually a thing, and he just he just kind of lucked into it. I think he just like thought to make up a religion, but there actually is one. When George converts, or he's trying to convert, the father asks him, is there one aspect of the faith that you find particularly attractive? And George says, I think the hats. The hat conveys that solemn religious look that you look in a faith. Very pious. That's funny. Elaine's boyfriend is, they argue because he's a podiatrist whether he's really a doctor or not. Who cares? I think the main thing from this episode is the phrase kavorka. Kramer got the kavorka, the lord of the animal. But then he takes a bunch of garlic and stuff to get the, I don't know, to make himself smelly or something like that. Also a great scene is when George's parents find out that he is converting religion, and George's parents are freaking out, and George's dad says, wait, is this a group that goes around mutilating squirrels? That's anything involving George's parents is awesome. Number 42, the shoes from season 4. Jerry is astounded when Kramer tells him he's managed to kiss a girl Jerry dated several times, only find out they ever got a handshake. The woman is fascinated with Elaine's expensive shoes, which drives Elaine crazy. And meanwhile, Jerry and George are trying to finalize a script, and they have a meeting with Russell from NBC. But Russell catches George staring at a 15-year-old daughter's cleavage, and now it's up to Elaine to come to the rescue. This is during the whole show within a show thing, and they're mirroring what happened, because in the actual Seinfeld first episode, there was no Elaine, and I think the network told them, like, you better have a female character in there. So they're kind of making fun of that. Also, Jerry and George finish the script, and they give it to people to look at, and George gives it to his therapist, and she says she didn't like it, and they argue about it, and she says, George, if you're going to be in a creative field, you're going to have to learn how to deal with criticism. And George says, how's this for criticism? You stink. How do you like that criticism? You know what's funny to me? That diploma on the wall. That's my idea of comedy. You sitting here telling people what to do. That's funny. Okay. The whole thing about Jerry, and she was a chef, and Kramer snubbed her, and that attracted her to him. So there was that whole thing. George says, I snubbed for a year, nothing. Every woman I saw, I snubbed. You never saw people so pleased. But when George and Jerry go to Russell Dalrymple's apartment, he is sick. He's throwing up. He's throwing up because Elaine sneezed on his pasta primavera at forget what that restaurant was called. But so now he's sick. He's throwing up, and the daughter comes in, and she bends over, and Jerry like nudges George, like, hey, look at the cleavage, and George is staring at it, and Russell says, get a good look, Costanza. That's another iconic scene. And then also afterwards, when Jerry says, look at the cleavage, it's like looking at the sun. You don't stare at it. It's too risky. You get a sense of it, then you look away. Very true, by the way. Number 41, the pledge drive from season 6. Jerry hosts the annual PBS pledge drive and asks George to get some Yankee players to appear on the show. George comes through and gets Danny Tartable to appear on the show. Kramer discovers that Jerry's been getting birthday cards from Nana, but he cashes them and Nana's bank account is overdrawn, and then Nana goes missing. And Jerry starts a rumor that Elaine's friend was hitting on Jerry, and that was stupid. And George thinks everyone is giving him the finger and decides to follow someone while driving Danny Tartable to the pledge drive. And but the main thing from this is Mr. Pitt. Elaine discovers that Mr. Pitt eats his candy bars with a knife and fork, and that starts a trend where everybody is eating with a knife and fork. When George is pitching the idea to get a Yankee to show up at the PBS pledge drive, he is eating his candy bar with a knife and fork, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I am eating my dessert." "How do you eat it? With your hands?" And it just starts a trend where everyone does it. At the end of the episode, they look at the around in the restaurant and everyone is doing it. And Elaine gets up and says, "What is wrong with you people? Have you all gone mad?" So there's that. But yeah, the thing with Nana and she's missing because she goes to look for the bank, and then they find her, and then she calls in to talk to Jerry to the pledge drive, and Kramer gets her to donate $1,500, and Uncle Leo is there for some reason, and she's like, no, stop it, she's on a very fixed income. Okay. Number 40, the nap from season 8. George needs to find a way to have a nap at work. His glass wall doesn't seem to make it that possible until he finds a way. Anyway, he runs into a bit of trouble when Mr. Steinbrenner wants him to see him and decides to wait in George's office. Elaine has a problem with her new boyfriend, Hal, who has a new mattress delivered to his house, and Kramer swims in the river. And Jerry is losing patience with the man he's hired to install new kitchen cabinets. Connie, he's not the most annoying character, but he's pretty annoying. He's the one that's like, I don't know what screw to use, I don't know what hinge to use, what should I do? It's like, dude, make a decision. And then finally Jerry gets fed up and just says, dude, just do whatever. And he has this gigantic kitchen cabinet thing that just like takes up the whole kitchen, and it looks horrible, so he makes him put it back. Yeah, that was dumb. Also he builds George's little nap thing under the desk, which is cool, but Steinbrenner comes in and he doesn't know this song is like, he's all hot breaker, love taker, brew baker, run this prison like a man. Oh. And he doesn't know the song, and he's trying to get someone to tell what the song is. It's Pat Benatar, by the way. And so basically he's waiting in George's office for George, and then the grandkids come in. He doesn't know the name of his own grandkids. He calls one of them Shorty. He just calls one of them Girl. But the kids see him. The dog sees George under the desk, but Steinbrenner doesn't. And George panics and calls Jerry and says, call in a bomb threat. And Jerry pretends to be a terrorist and says, well, you have to meet my demands of everybody getting their own fitted hat at a Yankee game. And that drives George crazy. And then at one point they think there's a bomb. The terrorists put a bomb there. So they tear apart George's desk. And in one drawer, there's a Playboy magazine and candy. Okay. Okay. So that is this episode, numbers 55 through 40. Next, we will do numbers 40 through 25. Getting to the good ones. Almost there. Getting to there's already been a lot of good ones. There's a lot of iconic scenes and characters, but now we're getting into the very best, the top 40. So thanks for watching or listening, and I will see you later.